So we are so excited to present to you a webinar specially designed for you. This is going to be delivered by Anindya Ghosh. He's an associate partner in IBM, and he would be taking you through very, very exciting use cases, applications, and how AI is shaping not just IBM, but across the globe. So as a continuation of this association, we are glad today to present a webinar co-hosted by REVA University, but delivered and led by Anindya Ghosh from IBM. So a quick recap on Anindya. He has a very strong background from both IIT and IIM Calcutta. He has done his MBA and engineering earlier to the coming into IBM, and he has been working in IBM for quite some time. He is the go-to person for a lot of academic initiatives. And why he is into a lot of academic initiatives, which includes all the IIMs, most of the IIMs, he works very closely in designing the program curriculum, because he says he knows what an MBA can do in this AI space, and therefore he's the right person actually to design the curriculum for them, because when they come into companies like IBM, there are specific roles that the organization expect an MBA to do. Let us bring in Anindya and let us understand how AI-driven technologies or driven opportunities can be the great way to build your career with an MBA in business analytics. So over to you, Anindya.
Thank you, Dr. Shinu. So I think as Dr. Shinu mentioned, right, the focus out here, what I want to achieve today is to excite you all with some possibilities, right, in the area of artificial intelligence, right? And, you know, there are a lot of these terminologies, AI, you know, natural language, deep learning, vision, conversational systems that you will keep hearing about. You know, you search Google and you will, you know, get these terms dime a dozen. But making sense out of this, contextualizing this, right, and especially bringing in a bit of industry and application flavor, which is what, let's say, you know, I have been fortunate enough to do over the last so many years. And what is in it for MBAs like us, right? And as Dr. Shinu said, I am an engineer and an MBA. So, you know, my entire career has kind of, I started off technical, you know, then over time, you know, I have kind of moved more on the business side. So there are a lot of opportunities, right, that I really wanted to talk to you about. I mean, let us not feel stymied because I am not a comp science graduate, or, you know, I have not done statistics from the Indian Statistical Institute, right? So let us not feel stymied about that, because the world of AI and the associated technologies in this space is throwing up a lot of possibilities, right? Which goes way beyond, I repeat that, way beyond your regular comp science and, you know, the highly technology oriented roles, right? We have and I'm going to talk about some of that as we move through the presentation that I have today, right? But let's start off with understanding artificial intelligence, right? So I think that's the first one. So let's understand AI, and some of you would already know that. But what I wanted to bring to all of you is, what does it mean? So we all know that artificial intelligence is something that is not new. It was there even in the 70s and 80s, right? You know that AI, you know, kind of was kind of born in some of the research labs in the US, you know, in those days. However, AI is as good as the data that you know that you collect, right? So this terminology about big data. What is big data, right? It is the conglomeration or accumulation of different kinds of data, not only your structured data, but a lot of the semi-structured and the unstructured data that you see across today in social media, in open media, and a lot of the data is also captured through the Internet of Things, the IoT sensing devices. So all of this was not there, right? Or even if it was, I mean, the technologies were not there. The big data technologies like Hadoop and all, right, which can harness the power or the processing or the huge processing power that is required to bring these data together, the parallel processing or the parallel compute that is required was not available, during those days. That is why AI as a discipline bore a lot of promise, but of course did not progress much because of the lack of some of the associated technologies. But as we came into the 21st century, and especially into the second decade of the 21st century, big data technology kind of took off in a very big way, right? Of course, I'm not going to get into a lot of the details of that, but we know that the big data technology, the advent of cloud computing, cloud storage, all of that actually made AI possible and to deliver this intelligence. And you can see this line out here. There's a new class of learning systems. The AI, advanced analytics, all of these are learning systems. And all of these are required within, let's say, any IT landscape, right? And that is why these, this area has become so enticing, so promising, and it is no longer futuristic. So let me kind of, put a word out there. Even a few years back, AI would have been futuristic. It is no more. We are living, breathing AI day in and day out. Companies are using artificial intelligence in more ways than one, and we are going to take some of the applications or the real life in applications or use cases to kind of speak to that. So let's talk about what AI is, right? And you would have heard a lot of these terminologies. It's important for us to know where we can play what role, right? Always put that lens on, right? I'm thinking as an MBA, what are the various kinds of things that I can do? What are the roles that I can play? So let's think about AI and think of it very simplistically, because one of my professors once said, if you learn a particular subject or a topic, but you cannot explain that topic in a couple of lines, or you cannot go to the brass tacks, it means that you have not really understood that particular topic. So what is AI? Artificial intelligence is a mirror image of natural intelligence. Natural intelligence is what we have in our brain, right? Our brain, of course, there are algorithms in our brain, right? There are association algorithms, there are reasoning algorithms, so there are multiple types of algorithms. But how does our brain create associations? How does our brain create logical reasoning? There are ways by which our brain does that, right? As a baby is born, a baby sees a lot of things, right? There is a vision. Baby hears a lot of things, which is audio, right? The baby, after a point, starts learning a language. It could be Hindi, it could be English, it could be Chinese, it could be Spanish, whatever that the language is. Because what we are doing is, what the baby is seeing, right? There are images which come into the baby's brain through the eye. When we say that, oh, have you seen that? This is a car, or this is a red car. So the image of a red car associated with the term red car, which is language, natural language, right, imprints an association in the baby's mind. So it is the creation of the first dictionary, right? So in our mind, we are creating a dictionary of associations, a dictionary of terms. As we grow up over time, the dictionary keeps on growing. We keep adding more and more associations. Then what happens is, from one association, I actually create other associations. That is when I actually start logical reasoning, right? Then, from that, I start making inferences. So I start first making associations of meaning, then I start getting other associations from those associations, and then I start making inferences, and then my entire knowledge discovery, right, is kind of complete. Of course, there are many other things that come in this entire spectrum. If the human mind develops empathy, right? Empathy means that in the language that I use, of course, the same things that I want to express, I can express in multiple ways. The language can be changed, right? There is no one way, you need to express something. There are multiple ways that you can do it. That is where we can tweak language to, bring in empathy, to our fellow beings, to our society, all around. And then we get into the area of complex reasoning. Now, if you look at this, of course, our vision and our voice comes first, right? We start analyzing those. After a certain age, we start understanding language. Then, over time, in parallel, we start developing empathy. And then, as we grow, there is knowledge discovery, and finally we get into complexity. So there is a pattern, there is a way in which our brain understands, right? Now transpose that to the artificial brain, or in this case, let's say it could be a computer, it could be a GPU, or CPU, whatever it is, right? We build the algorithms, and we can use any of these languages, right? It's not important what language we use. We can use R, we can use Python, we can use some aspects of Java, we can use PySpark. So there are multiple such languages akin to the biggest language that we have. You've got, for example, English. You've got Bengali. You've got Hindi. You've got many of the other languages. So there are as many languages, as many types of grammar and syntax. At the end of the day, we are trying to, what is it that at the base that we're trying to build? We are trying to build dictionary, right? Association, so that when I say something, the other person understands. And here is where the opportunities for us, come in. I kind of touched upon this earlier, right? So first, I understand. So as I said, I build the ontologies, the taxonomies, or in short, the dictionaries, and I can build the hierarchy, hierarchy of that. So, for example, a very simple hierarchy is, I can say Bangalore is a city. That is one association, right? Bangalore is equal to a city. But then the other association is Bangalore is part of Karnataka, right? It's excellent. Then Karnataka is part of India. India is part of Asia, right? You can see that there is a hierarchical relationship that we are developing, and we can start developing the taxonomy. This is called a taxonomy, right? You would have studied in biology, when we were in school. These taxonomies become an important part of our dictionary, right? And the ontologies are basically the associations that we build underlying these taxonomies. The machine brain starts understanding these like the human brain does. That's the understand part of it. And then it starts reasoning, because it can start building newer and newer associations, right, over time by grasping the underlying concept. They form hypothesis. So that is one order higher. And then there is a continuous learning that happens, right? If I just understand and reason one, I do not keep on learning. This continuous learning is extremely important, right, to kind of take it to the next stage. But all of this, after a point, will become irrelevant unless this reasoning, understanding, and learning is brought into interaction, right, with the outside world. We, as social beings, we interact. We impart our knowledge. We impart whatever we have learned to the other person, and we exchange ideas, right? And through the interaction, we learn even more. So this interaction then becomes the ultimate part of your machine learning systems. And of course, finally, you get into even more complex systems like recommendation engines, complex reasoning and all of that, right? So this is, in a nutshell, at a very basic level, how the AI systems behave, right, and how they learn and interact. And here is where we start making sense of what we can bring to the industry. So you saw the interaction part of it in the last slide. Just link that to this. As we have human conversations, similarly, we have artificial intelligence conversations. Of course, you have heard a lot about the various chatbots, right? There are chatbots everywhere today. There are in the banking space. You call up, in many cases, when you call up, let's say, an automobile manufacturing unit or automobile servicing unit, you may not even know that the first call is actually to an artificial intelligence chatbot, right? Which is actually made to sound like a human. Or you could even be chatting on the web, which is online, right? Before you go to a real person. You have got chatbots in the pharmaceutical space, healthcare, you name it, and you get chatbots. So there is this constant conversation which is happening, right? The question is, these areas, these AI conversations can actually go from very basic conversations, right? Your FAQs, the frequently answered questions, which are pretty much very easy to quote, and you can answer them. It's like saying the MCQs that are given to us in an exam, right? It's very easy for us to answer MCQs. We know what the right answer is. We select the right answer. It's done. So think of your FAQs as probably a slightly evolved version of your MCQs, but then there is always a right and a wrong answer. However, as we evolve, right, and as you've seen earlier, our brain evolves, there is complex reasoning that we have to do. So which means that your AI conversations can get more and more complex. I will give you an example. I would probably hate to call it a chatbot, but it's an AI conversation engine we built was for the pharmaceutical space. Now, in the pharmaceutical space, many of you would know that when you buy a medicine, right, a vial of a vaccine or maybe some capsules, at the back of the strip or the vial, you have the name of the company and you have a toll-free number. So if you have a question about how to use the medicine, please call up this number. Now, these conversations can become quite tricky and quite complex. So let's say the easy thing to answer is, what will be the dosage of, I'll say, what is the dosage of, let's say, Dolo? Dolo 650 is a very common drug. It's an analgesic, right? We take it when you have a headache or, there's pain. It relieves us of our, pain, headache, whatever. That's easy to answer, right? You ask, what is the dosage? Excellent. I mean, it is prescribed that you take it, let's say, I'm just picking it up, twice a day, done. These are FAQs. Now, you ask a question. I have already had a heart surgery, right? Let's say 6 months back. This was the precise condition, that I had. I'm not sure. And let's say in this case it's not Dolo. Let's say it's another medicine which we know much less about. I'm not sure if this medicine is safe for me. So what is happening is, in this case, your question is becoming contextual. It is not a simple yes-no answer, or it is not a simple FAQ. You are answering more complex questions which need considered judgment. That's a very important term, considered judgment. Now, in our minds, we know that such considered judgment can only come from a medical doctor, right? Or it can come from somebody who has been practicing medicine or who has actually been prescribing these medicines, who has seen the side effects of these medicines, seen the efficacy of these medicines over time. However, what we did was we built a system, and it was basically an anti-smoking drug for which we built a system where we actually took thousands of research journals and articles. There is this R&D that is done on this drug, and we set this as, like, we call it a corpus. Right? Corpus means it is all the input material or input data that you feed into this system, right? And then we started training the system the way you train doctors, because the doctor, is also training himself or herself by looking at the medicine, administering the medicine to somebody and seeing what are the side effects. So there's a learning cycle, learning process for a doctor also for a specific drug. In this case, we made the learning happen through reams of research articles, right? Extremely interesting project where we started getting into first and second level of contextual details, about this. So, if I am 65 years old and above, and I have this specific condition, is this drug safe for me to use, and what will be the recommended dosage? You may not have that very clearly laid out in FAQ, but you probably have to extract that information from somewhere in the research article, right, and make sense out of it, play it back. Somewhat similar to what a doctor would do by understanding the situation of that particular patient who is asking the question. So you see, this thing can actually happen in multiple domains. For example, you can ask the question, especially in the oil drilling industry, right? In a particular region of the world, with a particular topology or landscape, if you were to, right, drill a well, what are the chances, what is the probability that you're going to get oil or gas, let's say, right? It is not a very simple question to answer. It is, there is of course a complex science, but then there is a lot of contextual information. It could depend on the weather patterns in the area. It could depend upon the depth of the ocean floor. It could depend on a lot of things. It could depend on the texture of the ocean bed. Multiple things that could actually come up, because these are all contextual. So here is where I will actually start making you think. The world today needs a lot of such contextual systems or conversational systems to be built across multiple domains. We are just touching the tip of the iceberg, just the tip of the iceberg, right? We are probably excellent in the area of creating the first generation of, or maybe right now we are moving to the second generation of, chatbots. We have built some recommendation systems for some retail clients, but we are way off from creating the conversational systems for oil drilling, for medical science, research and development. It's going to take years, right? And this is where people like us come into the picture. So what do our very capable, comm science, graduates, colleagues do? They are the ones who are excellent in, let's say, Python, Spark, right? Who would code it, build algorithm. But the question is, the algorithm is built using input data in understanding the process. If you do not understand how the oil drilling process works, you try as much as you might, you will not be able to come up with the ontologies or the taxonomies, right? The dictionaries that I talked about earlier. If you do not understand how the medical space works, it will be extremely difficult for you to build those taxonomies and ontologies, which is the base building block of these complex systems. So who are the actors who are involved? Who are the people, right? So let's go back to this case of the medical system. You need a doctor, right? Because of course, a medical doctor brings in that SME or the subject matter expertise, understand that particular space. You need a person who will code it in. But who is the person who is going to bridge these two roles, right? Who is the person who is going to really go and create the taxonomies and the ontologies, right? Who's going to make sense out of it? Of course, the medical doctor is going to validate that. But the medical doctor is not going to sit down and create that for you, because that person has got another job. That person is in the medical profession. So we have borrowed him or her for a certain part of his or her time during the day. The person who is going to understand the process by sitting down with the doctor, who is going to really build the ontologies and the taxonomies, and then feed it back to the programmers to code it in whatever language he or she codes, is the business analyst, is the business consultant. There are people like us who bridge that gap, and that is a significant role that we play in this area. Let me take another example, right? Very recently, we built an AI-powered or AI-enabled student counseling system. This is the first of its kind in India, because when I say first of its kind, of course, there are student counselors there, but using AI, right? Has not been done earlier, correct? So basically what this does is the system, it takes in inputs around the personality of the student, the interest of the students, interest in the various education materials, the aptitude of the students, verbal ability, quantitative ability, spatial ability, all of that, right? There is an algorithm which is built inside, right? It makes sense out of that, and it spews up the recommendation. What is the recommended choice of career? Now, I was extremely fortunate, to be involved with this, because we launched that particular product on the 5th of September, which is Teachers' Day, right? And if I go back into the journey, right, the role that I played, and I replay this back to you, because this is where you will start seeing the relevance. Who was the person who started sitting down and making sense of, okay, how will the system look overall? What kind of inputs do we need? How will the recommendation engine, how should it look like? Should it provide only one recommendation? Should it provide two, the top three? Should I mishmash the first and second recommendation? How do I put the logical reasoning behind this? Who is the person who does that? So when I sat down, I said, okay, this is a big problem to solve. I kind of broke it down into small parts. I said, okay, now I need somebody who is a counselor, right? I need a human counselor. I will probably sit down with that person and understand what are the inputs that I typically take, right? When I have to build a system like this. So I sat down with her, and I started understanding, yes, interest, personality, and aptitude, these are important, right? And I started giving my own inputs, my own feedback. The counselor said, yes, that seems to be right. Now, what are the kind of questions that you would ask? The counselor said, okay, I can probably give you some psychometric tests. But then, all psychometrics may not work on a student. So what do? I start, sitting down with some of the millennials, administering the questions with them, seeing if it makes sense, going back and tweaking the questions so that, it becomes relevant. I come back and I say, okay, this is how the system this is how the flow would look like. Of course, post that, there has to be an architecture. Now, I'm not an architect, right? So I bring in an architect and he says, oh, wow, great. This is what you want. You are bringing in these kind of questions. Okay, this is how it flows. This is where the algorithm will fit. Excellent. Now, this is where the recommendation will come in. Let me create an architecture for you. So he creates an architecture. We get into a discussion. And then, there is a bit of tweaking. And then, he goes and says, okay, these are the technologies that we got to use. Of course, I'm not deep into technology, let's say. So he provides me with that guidance. Now I have to go and build the algorithm, right? I sit with the data scientist, the person who is a statistical modeler. The person asks me, what do you need? What do you want? I said, well, you're the data scientist. Well, the person tells me, no. You have to tell me the logic. Then I'm going to go and code or program. Then I start sitting down and thinking, okay, this person is expecting the logic from me. How will the recommendation work, right? For example, in personality, aptitude, and interest, should I give equal weightage? Should I give more weightage to one of the parameters? Should I give more weightage to one of the sub-parameters, right? How should I even look at this particular algorithm? Forget the statistical techniques, right? That will come from a data scientist. But how should I even look at this? I sat down and I had to kind of, and when I say I, of course, I know I had a team of business analysts who were MBAs, right? Sat down and we started making sense out of it. Then we started working together with the data scientist. The data scientist came up with an algorithm. We tested, we had to tweak it. So it's an ongoing process. So if you think about it, look at this entire process that we went through. As MBAs, we played a significant role out there. We bridged the entire project end to end, and that is the value that we bring to the table out here, right? The technologists come in, we bring in the technologist at the right moment, but making sense of technology, making it simple. And when we had to go back and explain to the students how the recommendation works, I had to go and do it because, of course, the logic was there in my mind, right? So I brought up this example for you to appreciate where the industry is looking at us, right? What kind of value we can drive out here. there are multiple types of problems that you can solve, and many of them are very interesting problems. I've been, again, as I said, extremely fortunate to work across multiple categories of problems, right? Email classification. So you receive tons of emails, throughout the day. Can somebody automatically archive or classify the emails and do an auto response so that I don't have to bother about it? Language translation. And when I say translation, I mean translation with meaning. So you have to do natural language processing. You have to understand the language and then convert that into another language. Visual inspection, optical character recognition, extremely important, right? It identifies logos, watermarks, many such things, signatures, many such things within documents, extract them into separate documents for further processing. We call that content intelligence, and we have actually built assets around that. And any industry would need that. Look at claims processing in insurance, look at invoice processing in finance. Any of these systems where a human being does this content intelligence today, actually we can make this person's job much easier if you can bring in these technologies. Automated order creation, right? Intelligent order creation. Again, I will not get into details, but you understand, what it is. Customer service care, you understand. I've just taken an example from pharmaceutical, a very complex example, and there are many simple examples also, that we have built. Employee care, HR in companies today. Actually, there are, they want us to build HR chatbots. They want us to, figure out what are the learning gaps that exist. What kind of learning can I provide? Can I have a chatbot to answer employees' questions around their salaries, their provident fund? When can I expect a promotion? This, that. There are 1,000 questions that, want us to answer in these large corporations, right? So you will see that, the opportunity, the umpteen to create such kind of, intelligent systems. We call them intelligent workflows that fit within the business. Now, within knowledge management, you can see a lot of these advisors, plant advisors, farm advisors, right? So can there be intelligent advisors which can advise the production manager to change the heat or to change the pressure, of a system without a human inspection, right? So, of course, you need a lot of IoTs or sensors out there. The sensors send the data back. It can get flow into an AI algorithm, and the algorithm can kind of then go back and say, okay, you know what? At this point, change this. And we can also build in a workflow to say, okay, we can the workflow can automatically go and change without the human having to intervene out there, right? So, but then all of this are being done. They are not prevalent in all the domains or all the industries. There is a lot that has to be done in different types of manufacturing units. And there is so much of scope that, I see personally over the next 10, 20 years or so, right? I mean, you will not exhaust this scope because you can think of as many industries, as many domains, as many functional areas, and you can think of as many applications, right? So that is where we are. Natural language processing, right? We, as I said, we process the way we process English, the way we process Spanish, we process natural language. We understand the syntax. As students, we used to learn Rev and Martin grammar, right? So here also in NLP, natural language processing, there's syntax that we have to understand. But what we also do is we recognize parts of speech, how to parse a sentence. So here it is not only keyword analysis, it is also how is the keyword used in context in a sentence, right? And there are some examples that that I will take, which will make it easier for you to understand. Recognizing named entities. Entities could be invoice number is equal to this. There's a number. Both of these, this is called a key value pair. They are all entities. The invoice number is an entity. So can I recognize that invoice number is embedded into this particular text? It's an entity, right? So can I draw it out or can I extract that? Textual information, of course. I'm saying this invoice is wrong, incorrect. So incorrect is the word. It's a textual information which talks something about the particular invoice, right? And then can I say incorrect, wrong, bad, negative. Can I, based on the context, classify all these words in within the particular context into one class? Let's say, can I create multiple such classes so that every time a new element of text comes in, it hits those classes and it says, okay, let me auto classified into one of these classes. That is precisely what we do in natural language processing. So today, I'll give an example. Many of you would know that in banks, right, for credit cards, let's say, we do risk profiling of customers. How is risk profiling done? It is done through the past purchase behavior. However, past purchase behavior may not always be a harbinger of future behavior. What many companies are now trying to do is trying to mine your social media profile, trying to see you up all over, right? Maybe your Twitter handles. They're trying to see how opinionated you are. Do you have, let's say, a bit of a right leaning or a left leaning? For example, are you more of an introvert or an extrovert? Are you a person who actually wants to take risks? And they're trying to get this meaning out of from all the posts that you are putting on social media, right? And it is trying to make sense out of that, and it's adding to the risk classification algorithm and say, okay, this person, based on this NLP that was done on whatever this person had on social media, it's seeing this person's risk profile. He's a medium risk profile. So let's go and see what was his risk profile from the statistical modeling that was done on structured data. Does it really match, right? Should we do a course correction of this person's risk profile? Because the bank or the credit card company will make decisions to offer you some products and offerings based on that, right? So NLP becomes extremely important. NLG, natural language generation. This is very interesting. Lately, you would have seen an example. It came in the papers, right? I definitely know it came in the Times of India, maybe in some of the other papers. The U.S. Open, right? Of course, is being played in open stands, right? The players are playing, but then you need engagement with the audience. So you need to generate the kind of excitement and buzz, that happens, on a tennis court. But there are no spectators. Who's going to generate that buzz? You know what? Come to think of it, there's an AI system. An AI system which is out there, what the system is doing is, it actually is observing the match, right? It's seeing, so let's say, of course, the top three men's seeds are not, one of them, had to leave, but the other top two seeds are not playing, in the US Open. But let's say any couple of players, who are playing, and the camera and the system picks up that this person has actually won a particular point. So there are images and there are videos which are fed into this artificial intelligence system, which actually is trained to say that, okay, here is a point that was made. The moment the system understands there was a point made, there is a canned background noise that has already been fed, right? It is a video, understanding, and then there's a generation of audio, right? Similarly, and by the way, this was worked by IBM Research Labs. Similarly, you can pick up aspects from social media, and the system can generate in natural language what it actually makes out of all of this, and in a nutshell say, this particular personality is probably this. That is natural language generation, right? So you are first processing the natural language, because I understand this, I have to learn Will and Martin, I understand English, I understand the associations, and then I start to write, because I have to now write an essay in the same language by understanding what I've learned in the dictionaries by the words. That is precisely, we are combining the full circle. That is what we are doing in NLP, NLU, and NLG, right? Extremely exciting field, lots to be done. This is an example I wanted to give you, right? It's a pharmaceutical example. You can read this. Chantix is a drug. It's anti-smoking drug. This is how it makes sense. The AI algorithm goes through this. It doesn't do a keyword search. It does a contextual search. It says duration is 6 weeks. It says that the administration of the drug is actually oral. It's not a vaccine, right? Or it's not an injection. The drug, it identifies the drug name. It says the clinical trial is a study, right? It identifies what a dosage is. It identifies what is the specific therapy area. So the AI system looks at this piece of text, right? And creates a table like this in the background, which you would not even see. And then this will be processed for anything else that we want to do in the future. So people call up the contact center. I forgot my password. How do I get a new password? Can't log into your site. There are multiple ways that people talk. So what it does is it identifies the intent. The first thing in natural language processing, whenever you're looking at sentences, and this will become important as we all get into our careers, right? The intent. What is the intent with which that natural language has been set up? Or why has that textual information been provided? Here it identifies the intent as a password reset. That is why the person is calling up in an AI conversation system. I'm frustrated. I haven't been able to log into your online billing system, right? Now, it's a slightly complex AI conversation, algorithm. If the intent is a password reset, of course, because I'll not be able to log in, it infers. There is no mention of password or reset anywhere, but it infers that it is a password reset because it is trained to pick up these words and say, oh, frustration, cannot log in, has to be a password reset. The intent is password reset. Entities is an online billing system. That is the entity that we're talking about out here, right? Emotional tone, anger, and this becomes important because we are training the associations. Whenever I see the term frustrated, use of term frustrated association equal to anger, right? That is there in the dictionary and in the back end. That is what people like us have already coded in. Context, of course, because the person who is calling in, there is information about the person, so you know who the person is. And the context is, it's a mobile, because it is probably talking about the online billing system for my mobile. Now, this is how NLP works. How do I reset my password with dialogue? So you have to guide the user. So there is certain things that we need to do. Someone has stolen my credit card. So what does the system do? It deflects because you have to transfer to a human agent. So these are decisions. And by the way, we as MBAs, when we go and we are building a system like this is our job. When we say reset my password, we have to say, okay, my understanding of the entire process, if this is the question that comes in, I have to articulate the system in such a way that it has to be a dialogue. I have to ask the agent to guide the person through a set of steps. It is my job because I am setting up the protocols and the rules. Someone has stolen my credit card. I will tell the system, transfer to human agent. Nearest store, launch application or map the directions. You can see that, right? I mean, these are some very logical answers that come out from some of the questions that these people ask. The point is, who sets these rules? These are people like us who design such systems, right? It is not the programmer who's doing this. Neither is it the SME. The SME can guide us, or the SME can provide a validation. But we as the business managers who own that process, right? If I own that particular, agent process, this is how I have to design it. So I have to know what needs to happen. I'll probably not get into the details of this. I already talked about this, and I'll be a bit mindful of the time out here. This is that pharmaceutical example, that I talked about. So in any AI conversation system, you have a conversation service in the front end with which you chat. There is an NLU. Of course, it has to understand, what you are saying. And then in the back end, as I say, so NLU is, I make sense of the question. I understand the question, but I still don't have an answer. So I send it back to my discovery service, and I start finding appropriate answers. And then I rank and retrieve because I do not know, because the answers could be contextual. There could be multiple answers. I have to figure out which is probably the most relevant answer. That is done through some of these services, which are out there. And of course, the knowledge studio is all the dictionaries, the ontologies, the taxonomies that we have built, right? That is how such systems work. exactly similar to a human brain. Again, I will not spend too much of time on this. Typically, such systems, there are multiple stakeholders, the customer, the developer, the performance manager, and many of us, maybe performance managers or business managers, who will actually engage with such systems and with the people around us, right? And hence, it's important for us to understand the potential of AI and what we can do. I wanted to quickly, walk you through, I will not take too much of time on this. When we talk about video, images, OCR, right? When we talk about something to do with the eyes, .jpg, .mp4, these kind of files which are coming in. In video, we can actually, we have drone cameras, some use cases. You can figure out social distancing being maintained or not. Surveillance and security, you very well know. We can use them in airports, production houses. Distracted driver. We actually build use cases, a use case where a driver is sleepy, right? And you actually have a video camera which is fitted into the car. And some of these cars are now coming up with this. It sees the eyelids of the driver. It keeps on mapping the eyelids. The moment the eyelids droop a bit, it automatically gives a signal. Say, oh, you know what? Sleepy or a distracted driver, because there might be an accident. It automatically alerts, there will be a beeping sound, so the driver kind of wakes up, right? Compliance monitoring. So, many of you in industry would need to see, okay, if I have created a contract, are all the terms and clauses included in the contract? It's a very tedious manual job. Can I create an AI system which will go through it and say, oh, you know what? There are some clauses that are missing. Of course, we have to train the system. Virtual augmented reality is extremely interesting. Without going into the factory floor, let's say, I'm in my house and I have a suspicion that some machine needs a bit of maintenance. Otherwise, it's going to it's going to falter. I don't have to get into the production floor. I can have a virtual reality, an augmented reality machine. It can go and zoom in, into that particular machine. It can show me, right, while I'm sitting in my home itself. It can show me the pressure, the temperature, and all of those vital parameters. And first of all, it gives me a visual. Second, it tells me all the sensory information. And third, it also can give me a recommendation as to whether the system thinks that maintenance is required or not. So I, as a plant manager, do not even have to go into the plant, and I can probably make a decision by sitting within the confines of my home. And by the way, a lot of this is being used in China today. I was reading the papers recently. A lot of mining activity. The miners, without, of course, in a COVID situation and all, miners do not get clogged up together, in the deep mines. They have machinery out there. They're observing, through virtual reality, what is down underneath there, and they're operating through remote control, right? These various machinery to see, can I mine, whatever I'm mining. It could be coal, it could be diamonds, it could be whatever it is. It could be gold, but sitting in the comfort of another place and not deeply entrenched in the mind, right? So a lot of possibilities out there. Images, I already talked about it. There are a lot of documents. One of the use cases that we have built is, whenever your car gets damaged, you see a physical assessor actually go out there, look at the damaged portion of the car and say, is it a dent? Is it a scratch? Is it something that where, because of the dent, the engine would have got impacted? So the person is expensive. It takes time. So what you do is you tell the person, upload pictures or images from multiple angles, right, of the car. It sends the images, and the AI algorithm actually looks at the images and starts figuring out what is the extent of the damage. And we've already built this for one of the top insurance companies who is using it, and more will follow. And then in the system, we have already built in, okay, this is an estimate, for a dent. This is an estimate for a scratch. Well, this is a car which is Maruti Ertiga. Perfect. So Maruti Ertiga, this dent probably costs this much because it's already been fed in by the auto manufacturer or the servicer. So based on the image that you are seeing, the system has an algorithm which says that This is the size of the dent, right? This is how much it will take to repair. So the approximate cost of this repair will be so much based on whatever that manufacturer has fed into the system. So these are the kinds of things that we are doing. I mean, extremely exciting. And OCR, again, as I said, you can extract a lot of these from documents, invoice processing, a lot of these, invoice processing or claims processing. There is so much of documentation. Even, for example, lawyers and all, right? Law firms, they can use a lot of this OCR to extract the key entities, right? Signature detection, right? You give a check, and the system actually determines that this is a signature. Or you give a legal document and you do not know where the signature is. Based on the patterns of writing, the AI algorithm decides that it is a signature, it is not your regular text, right? So we have built such content into intelligent systems, and of course, we are trying to customize it for across multiple industries, right? So the net, the point that I'm trying to make is, these are some exciting application use cases, but we are still scratching. There is lots more to be done. As you get into the industry, right, you can specialize in your domain. Somebody can say, I can be in CPG, I can be in oil and gas, I can be in pharmaceutical, healthcare. And you have got a lot of opportunities, as I explained. I gave that example of, the kind of roles that we can play. And we can customize a lot of these assets that are being built in the world, right, for the domains that you have selected. This is an example of document entity extraction. I mean, it's an example of an invoice. We do key value pairs, but I will not get so much into detail given the paucity of time that we have. If you can move to the last slide of mine, and then I will rest my case after that. You can just move on, please. The idea out here is there are multiple technologies that we are involved. There is computer vision, which is image processing that is involved. NLP is involved. So all of this, so you can see from the invoice, using all these technologies, you can come up to these entities, right? Or the key value pairs. Smith Law Firm is a certified name, the delivery method, right? So companies like Amazon and all, right, can use such technologies in a big way. And on the right-hand side, you can see that it actually comes up with what the outputs are, the outcomes are. And people who have used Amazon a lot, or people who have used Flipkart and all, you will see that many of these things become important, as you're doing e-commerce, for example, right? You would have seen that in e-commerce, but then many companies need this because they need to process. All of this will now go into their database, right? So you don't need a human to translate this invoice into all the information on the right-hand side. It automatically gets done through these use of these technologies. And I'll just within 1 minute, I mean, I can actually probably go on for hours on this slide. I have specialized. One of my areas is pharmaceutical. We did this for a large global pharmaceutical company. The opportunities are tremendous, right? Alzheimer's and Parkinson's research. So, for example, if you take the speech patterns of an Alzheimer's patient, you will see that over time, the person starts lisping, right? There is stammering. There is person starts forgetting words. Deeper intonation on certain words, lesser emphasis on certain words. So there are patterns that one can determine. All of this, when you actually fit it into, let's say, an AI algorithm, and you bring a new person in, and you do not know whether the person has Alzheimer's or not, you're trying to find out, right? You then take audio samples of that particular patient, you bump it against this reference, the training sample that you have created, and you see that the early warning signals of Alzheimer's can be found out. Similarly, you can do for Parkinson's. Acoustic pressure, right? People who have Parkinson's put more emphasis on certain words. There is a release of air pressure, when they talk. Are there certain patterns which are coming up that you can bump up against an AI system, right? Where the base reference data for Parkinson's patients is actually held. So You can go on and on, right? I mean, I will not get into some of the other areas. I mean, across the pharmaceutical value chain, in upstream R&D, in clinical trials, right? For example, right now, COVID-19 drugs, right? Both the drugs as well as the vaccine, clinical trials are happening. Can you hasten the process? You will see that the clinical trial typically takes about 10 to 15 years. Today, we are trying to get the COVID-19, vaccine or the drug within 1 year. How is that possible? It's the use of with the use of such technologies. Of course, there is a safety aspect. We need to test on a significant part of the population, but there are such technologies that actually cuts down on the cycle time. It cuts down on the probability of failures, right? So that is what I wanted to leave you with, right? This was the last slide. I wanted to give you an example of end-to-end life sciences ecosystem, and you can get similar ecosystems across many of the other domains. So having said that, I will hand it over back to Dr. Shinu.
Thank you so much, Anindya. It was such a breadth and depth of areas that you have covered in AI, and we are so glad that you get to work on such cutting edge projects just because of that you got into the right team with IBM. And I'm sure that this opportunity is available for all our audience as well, those who are looking for actually changing over to an AI-driven careers, and which is actually the need of the day today. So every industry is going to the change. So we run a program in association with IBM, and this is a specially designed course, which we call it as an MBA in Business Analytics. So unlike the other regular courses, that here the focus is on AI-driven decision making and analytics as a sub part of it. But here, since this particular industry is evolving very fast, we have incorporated what most of the things that what Anindya has today spoken about. So that could be creating decision systems using structured data or unstructured data, moving from say system generated data to NLP to vision technologies, so that you are solving problems or you are identifying opportunities for organizations or humans to leverage upon. So this is the whole focus of this program. We teach it through practically lab-driven industry-grade problems. So it is problem-solving based program. It's not done on a typical theoretical sense. Every program, every module is driven or designed with solving certain industry problems using AI. And we specialize in some of the areas. And incidentally, most of the use cases that what IBM is working on, we also kind of work on smaller prototypes because of the university status that we have. So nobody is kind of limiting the way that we can actually look at. So we have certain PhD doctoral work as well on healthcare, but this particular program will give you a very good understanding on the technology landscape, the AI ML opportunities, and different domains. How do we apply? So this is the focus. So if you see the kind of modular structure, you would understand it is kind of overturned a typical MBA program into an analytics program. So we would start with how to understand data, how data comes in, what kind of data, and how to build it actually in a structured, either an SQL or a NoSQL kind of a database, or even large data lakes, and then moving on to find patterns using statistics and build models using machine learning, moving on to text-based analytics or using deep learning if it is vision or more of video analytics, and then get on to domain-based. So some of the domains which we concentrate here is marketing and retail, or financial analytics, or supply chain analytics. We also have 2 certifications with IBM. So one is IBM has a proprietary tool called Predictive Modeler, which is a end-to-end tool which also would help you to deploy in real-time AI solutions. So we have a certification which is a globally recognized certification. And of course, we use cognitive analytics with IBM Watson and create chatbots as part of this module as well. And we would end up with moving on to how to actually build, say, consulting deck or proposals for new opportunities. And that is what an MBA should actually look at, right? So when you go and like Anindya just mentioned, that how will you actually create those opportunities for companies to build on, leveraging data science or data scientists or the systems that you already have. So this is what we look at, and at the end of it, there are multiple projects, and we feel that there are a lot of value being added into your resume with this kind of an MBA program. So we are very glad that we have very senior industry leaders who are teaching in this program. Most of them are either CTOs or CDOs or senior level directors or entrepreneurs who are building this system are teaching in this program. So that is our differentiation. Yeah, so some of the projects which we work in may not be the IBM scale, but we have certain conversational AI, which is very proud of. We have been about 15 plus of our researchers are working on this, on various parts of language-based conversational AI. Enterprise analytics, which is connecting different dots so that a CEO or a decision making becomes more easy. Lot of opportunities. That is what exactly Anindya just mentioned. We are also thrilled, excited. Every part of a human, wherever it has been touched, we could look at as an opportunity where AI could add value. Healthcare is one important area that we look at. We have a set of cybersecurity programs. So we also have a interdisciplinary kind of research, which is on security analytics, starting from just what Anindya just mentioned, email classification, moving on to predicting ransomware attacks, to optimizing your resources. All that would come under security analytics. We also have something on employee life cycle analytics, especially optimizing resources, human resources, and building value. So with this, I would kind of take a few questions which is coming. One of the question is that being a mechanical engineer, will I be suitable for these kind of profiles? So Anindya, if you could look at, is the engineering background, whether, because I know that you have done chemical engineering, right? And we see a lot of that kind of interesting, incidents, that a lot of them from chemical engineering. And so does it matter? The question is this.
Yeah, so first of all, short answer, absolutely, absolutely yes, right? And in fact, you would be very well suited. Again, as I said, I am from a chemical engineering and then an MBA background, right? But after a point, it is the experience that you have in the industry that begins to matter, right? So yeah, do not even, begin to worry about whether a mechanical engineer or electrical engineer, civil engineer, or maybe even, outside of engineering. It does not matter, because there is space for everybody. As I said, there was space for, a human counselor to work on this AI project. Similarly, there's space for a medical doctor to work. There's space for engineers, and then there's space for comp science graduates, who actually will do the program, and then there's space for MBAs. So it is a field which is actually democratizing our entire world, right? As much as there is specialization, there is also generalization. So it's a balance of both of this, and I think it's very exciting times ahead. So again, answer is absolutely yes.
Yeah, we also, because we have experience with a lot of people coming from different backgrounds to our, I think it's the passion, it is the ability to connect the dots, it is the ability to constantly learn in this sphere, because you can't just relax here. That is what is more important, I think. Yeah, I think that question has been. One is asking that I have the CAD experience. Another question is how important is domain understanding. If I don't come with, say you mentioned medical, so is that how important is to understand domain while building AI system?
Which is a great question. So most of the MBAs, right, when we enter the industry, and let's say we're just about 1 to 2 years of experience. I'm not talking about people who are, more experienced. We do not come with that background. We do not come with a specific domain experience. We build that over time. What is needed is an analytical mind. When I say an analytical mind, I don't mean analytics. It's an analytical, logical reasoning mind. It's a mind which wants to understand and learn business processes, how, they interact, a mind that would want to not get into the technicalities, let's say, of a cognitive system or an AI system, but understand how they could, work. And to really borrow Dr. Shinu's words, she actually, this is a very important thing that she mentioned: connect the dots. A mind that knows how to connect the dots is extremely, extremely important. I'll give you one example, right? An example in data science, LinkedIn. A lot of you know this, know the story. It actually came in the HBR of 2012, October. There was this person, when he joined LinkedIn, he found that, it was like it was a professional networking site, worked like a startup, excellent. But, this particular functionality, this feature, that if I know Dr. Shinu and Dr. Shinu knows person X, then probably I know person X also. So throw up a recommendation that you may know person X. Can you send him an invite? This functionality was missing, right? It is called a social connectedness. Now, of course, there was an entire story. You can go and read that article. Who came up with this? It is the connection of the dots. It is the understanding of how social connections work, how professional connections work. There was no data science in that. Let me be very, very honest. There, it was an understanding of how the processes work, how the human mind works, how the social connections work. And that got translated into a use case. And this person became one of the stars in LinkedIn, right? He got the job done. He got the functionality built through some data scientists, programmers, coders, had to explain it to the CEO. All of that great things happened. But connecting the dots, that is what this person did. And today LinkedIn is what it is because of, and again, I'm not saying that it's only for this functionality, but it is one of the most important functionalities that even Facebook has borrowed. Other networking sites which are not professional, they have borrowed. That's the idea. The power of the idea is extremely important out here. And that is what people like us can bring to the table.